Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the first of our Clare conversations. My name is Geraint Jones. I'm Clare MC Saatchi's Global Marketing Director, and today we're going to be talking about the topic of how an illness is redefining wellness. Just to give you some quick ground rules and to give you a bit of an introduction, Clare is the strategy consulting arm of M&C Saatchi, and as such, the crisis has had a pretty polarizing impact on our business, actually. Some of our clients in FMCG, in financial services, and in retail are actively working to manage spikes in demand and the associated brand experience issues that brings. Others in airlines, restaurants, or even automotive are actually conserving cash reserves. And if anything, they're beginning to think about how their businesses can move fully into a what's next mindset. So the impact of COVID-19 is being felt very differently in every sector, in every country, and every business. And for Clare, that's meant that we've had to be even better at listening to the needs of our clients and their customers. And increasingly, we're working to help light the path to what comes next, the bounce, and then the long recovery that we'll all have to face. And for us at Clare, that means staying very true to our purpose, to what we were founded to do, which is to bring clarity to complex decision-making and unlock pathways to growth. So to help do that for as many people as possible, we've launched Clare Conversations, an ongoing global webinar series where we discuss key strategic issues for brands, strategists, marketers, experienced professionals, and innovators. Each conversation is designed to be useful, specific, and to add some clarity to the often confusing world that we're confronted with right now. And today I'm delighted to be joined by a superb panel to discuss how an illness is redefining wellness. From Switzerland, Franck Bacuet, who is Global Analytics and Insights Senior Director for the Pain Relief category at GSK. He's a hugely experienced individual and has worked across healthcare, pain relief, and personal care brands for more than 25 years, including a long stint at Procter & Gamble. Franck will share his wealth of experience in health and wellness and what it all might mean for brands tackling the current crisis. From the UK, we have Lucy Denver, who heads up brand communications for Reebok. From her beginnings in British intelligence, leading a team of data analysts, Lucy later combined her knowledge of technology and connection with her love of fitness, setting up her own gym, consulting for global brands including Lucozade Sport, and then eventually joining the Reebok team in 2018. She continues to champion the benefits of fitness and well-being for mental health through her own project, We Are the Antidote. From Singapore, we're joined by Manoj Namboodiri, who is the former SVP and business head at Zimplistic, or Rotomatic, the pioneering direct-to-customer kitchen robotics business operating across 20 countries from its headquarters in Singapore. Rotomatic's vision is to use technology to make cooking at home and eating healthy easy, so they should have a very interesting point of view on the direct-to-customer trend that we've seen very recently. Manoj also spent 13 years running consumer businesses with the New Zealand dairy giant Fonterra across several Asian markets, including China, Southeast Asia, and South Asia. Before Fonterra, he worked for a decade with Reckitt Benckiser India, managing iconic brands like Dettol. We're also joined from the east coast of the US at 8:30 this morning by Guto Andrade, the leader of Hilton's global creative studios in McLean, Virginia. The studios are Hilton's internal agency, serving all of its 19 brands and comprised of 60 diverse creatives in 3 locations around the world. Before Hilton, Guto spent the last 20 years between creating and leading global in-house teams for Under Armour, Motorola, and Sony Electronics, as well as working at agencies as Chief Creative Officer at 15.4 and Senior Designer at Lippincott. And finally, from Clare M&C Saatchi, we're joined by Skaiste Nish, one of our directors specialising in the consumer healthcare sector. Skaiste acts as a trusted partner for some of our biggest clients, like GSK, collaborating on complex challenges which require identifying growth opportunities and providing clarity on how to unlock them, skills that are in pretty high demand right now. Skaiste has put together a short presentation to set up the discussion, so I'll now hand over to her to get us going.
Thank you, Geraint. We'll just upload the presentation. Great. So I'm sure many of you have heard talks about us going back to a completely new and different world after this crisis is over. But just the fact that everyone's talking about it doesn't mean it's going to happen. Some change will take place. But what we are really interested in is the change that will impact the brands and the businesses that we work with. And specifically, we're interested in looking at the impact that this will have on wellness brands. And when we started looking at this area, we identified two themes, two really rich topic areas. The one, the impact that we might see on the physical health and wellness and the brands that operate in that space, and the mental health wellness space. Both are really rich and interesting topics and deserve an hour of time. So for today, we decided to focus on the first topic, and the panelists that have joined us today will be able to share their opinions around the first more physical health, body health topic. Before I kind of get into opportunity areas and implications for brands, I just wanted to share a few learnings we've seen from looking at what happened after previous crises. We just wanted to see whether there's actually any data that supports the fact that there will be certain changes after this life-changing event we're going through. And there is actually quite a lot of interesting data, some data that clearly supports the fact that habits like washing hands will stay with us forever for the rest of our lives. There is data also that's saying that these kind of habits will just ebb away after 6 months. There are interesting studies showing that there will definitely be unexpected changes in societies that will have implications for brands. Like, for example, in the past kind of epidemic in Singapore, consumers really took up the washing hands habit. And that not only meant that there was a very limited number of SARS cases, but actually there was a massive drop in flu cases, which had an impact on the healthcare industry and the brands. But as I said, lots of this data is conflicting, contradictory, so it's very difficult to make early predictions and concrete predictions, but it's definitely not too early to start talking about the implications for brands and the areas that we want to start focusing already now. So that's what I'm going to talk about, but I don't want to spend a lot of time talking because the primary objective here is to actually hear from our panelists. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to share 4 opportunities and implications for brands. And I'm really interested to hear what the panelists have to say about them. And I really welcome opinions that are different, because I will just make our discussion really interesting. But just to start off, the first area that I want to talk about is this real shift towards big, trusted, sometimes efficacious and science-led propositions and brands. So in the West, lots of consumers really started buying excessively effective science-led propositions and going to brands like Dettol. Natural solutions have been left on the shelves. But for example, in China, consumers have really taken up the traditional Chinese medicine. So these are natural health and wellness solutions, but in that society, they really trust it to deliver the benefits consumers expect. So what we really see is the shift towards a kind of brands and propositions that are trusted and proven to work. And it's really refreshing for me to be able to talk about this, talk about the fact that being a big, trusted, established brand is actually good, that you should be proud of it, because in the past couple of years, all we've been talking about is the fact that you need to, look small, startup-y, innovative, and almost sometimes even hide away from the fact that you have established heritage and, you're science-led. This has definitely been a big bang in this current crisis, where consumers have reevaluated what's really important to them, and have really went back to some of the big trusted brands. So it's really important that if you have this trust and heritage, and sometimes efficacy or science credentials in your brand DNA, it's important that you're proud of it and shout about it now, but you also find ways to leverage it long term to make sure your brand kind of is in a good place to actually keep growing after the crisis. So that's an interesting area and kind of brings a fresh kind of perspective of how we can talk about the big established brands and what kind of opportunities they might have. The second area I want to talk about is prevention. and preventative solutions that consumers are turning to, the solutions that would ensure long-term consumer health. There's definitely been a big uptake of vitamins, mineral supplements, a big uptake of, kind of sports activities in home, going for walks. And I've been working with healthcare brands for 10 years, and at least in the past 5 years, I've definitely helped a number of brands stretch their portfolios to this preventative area to ensure they offer products and services that ensure consumers' long-term health. But the businesses I've seen, that they weren't really sure about the size of price in that area. And what we're quite confident now is that this trend that we've seen already before the crisis will really accelerate after the crisis. So there will be some trends that we've already seen that will kind of not be as important after the crisis, but the trend in prevention will really grow. So it's important, if your brand hasn't considered stretching the portfolio into the preventative area, to think about it now, and the brands that have already thought about it, do have a look at the preventative area more seriously and maybe dissect the elements within it more carefully, because the size of price will be bigger. And I'm not talking here only about preventative kind of products that potentially boost immunity or enhance recovery. I'm also talking about this need to provide emotional reassurance to consumers that your brand, your service, or your product is supporting their long-term health. So that's the second area, the prevention. The third area I want to touch upon is the situation with premium brands. So in previous crises and the current crisis, we see that the food and drinks industry and healthcare industry is doing okay, but there's a question mark around premium brands. They might be suffering, especially, and they will keep suffering because of the economic downturn. So we just really wanted to highlight the fact that there's an opportunity for premium brands, and it's really important for premium brands to really think creatively and invest in kind of new innovative solutions to ensure they stay relevant and they appear to be affordable to the masses of consumers. So think about innovative pricing models, different packaging, different distribution solutions, or even think about trialing behavior change strategies that over time prove to consumers that your wellness proposition is actually worth investing in. So really important to bear this in mind for premium brands in the economic downturn. And the final area to touch upon is transformative innovation, transformative propositions. So even before the crisis, we've seen companies kind of investing in new kind of solutions like food delivery services, which were doing quite well. Other companies have been investing in things like telemedicine, which actually were struggling to take off. But now with the current changes, we hear left, right, center that especially the telemedicine will take off, because consumers have seen that that can actually solve the frictions in their daily life and actually make their life easier, and actually healthcare professionals' lives easier. And that just leads me to this one, I think most kind of interesting implication for brands is that this crisis is definitely not the right time to stop investing in research and development. And it's definitely not the time to kind of shy away from risky opportunities. We will be stepping into the world where consumers are slightly more open-minded, where they're slightly more likely to try new solutions and new brands. So this might be just the right opportunity for you to launch a more transformative proposition and actually lead the category as a result. So these were just the four initial areas I wanted to kind of mention, and obviously hear everyone else's opinion about that. So the first one is about ensuring the brands that have the trusted heritage or science credentials in their DNA, they should really be proud of it now and ensure they find ways to leverage that long term. The second area was about making sure we stretch our product and services portfolio to tap into new consumer needs, and especially the prevention area. The third point was around the need for especially premium brands to be creative and invest in agile innovation in this economic downturn, And the fourth area was around transformation, which is really to make it very clear that now might be the right time to launch something a bit more risky and actually lead your category. So that was that from me, and I would love to hear what the panel has to say about these points, and hear other opportunities they see for brands in the wellness space. And I will hand it back over to Geraint.
Thank you, Skaiste. So we're going to kick off with some questions for each of our panelists. I'm delighted to say we've got over 160, 120 of you now on the call, which is great news. And we've been inundated with questions from you in advance. And I must say, we won't be able to answer all of them, but we will try to answer as many as we can. So let's ask the questions then, shall we? I'm going to come to you first, Franck. So how is this going to affect the healthcare industry, the over-the-counter healthcare industry in particular? Do you expect a growth to come from existing portfolio brands, your science-based products, or do you see some opportunities for newer, more natural preventative products? Because those two feel like positions that are in tension right now.
Yeah, good question. Thank you. I think overall, I don't think this crisis will fundamentally change anything. If anything, I think it's going to be a catalyst for existing trends. So it's going to be an acceleration of a number of things, and one of the trends, it's been mentioned already, being wellness. It was there. I think it's going to be an acceleration, and within wellness, particularly the prevention area, and typically prevention being associated with natural product. I think to answer your question, I think natural products in the mid long term will benefit the most. Now this is linked to the current an answer to the current health crisis. I think there's another crisis coming our way. We start to see the first signs of it. It's a severe economical crisis, and I think another part of the industry will benefit, and it's all the value proposition. So being the own label, the generics. I think it's going to be another section portion of the market, of the industry, that will benefit mid long term from this crisis, because money will be tight, and a number of consumers will have no choice but default to generics or own label propositions.
Skaiste, do you agree with that sort of assessment?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think the healthcare industry in general will be affected most, and mostly positively, and it will come not only from the fact that consumers are more aware of this kind of wellness or prevention needs, but also the brands in this industry will be pushing through with more innovations, stretching their portfolios. That's one element. Another element to consider is what I've quickly mentioned is there will be a massive growth in kind of telemedicine, and there will be, you will see different type of, distribution channels, different influencers the industry will be using. So that will indirectly open up different opportunities for the wellness brands.
It's interesting because I think we've seen just this morning in the news, Coca-Cola globally pulling back on all of their advertising spend for the foreseeable future. And yet just yesterday, Procter & Gamble saying that they're going to double down and they're going to continue to advertise through the crisis, and more importantly, going to continue to invest. So it feels as if you've seen the sort of IPA presentations here in the UK, or some of the discussions being had over at Ad Age about investing in times of crisis in your advertising brand and innovation, it feels like wellness brands, particularly those big brands that have wellness as part of their portfolio, have a significant opportunity to raise their excess share of voice, to use a Mark Ritson term, and probably grow share of market. Do you think that's fair, Skaiste?
Yes, I think it's interesting. The different kind of companies have taken different approaches, and it could be down to the type of brands they own, the type of propositions they own, because it looks like the wellness brands and propositions, they see the opportunity to be more visible and leverage the credentials that consumers actually see the value now. But it could be that the brands owned by Coca-Cola, they don't potentially they don't feel they don't have anything very relevant to say at the moment, especially maybe, you know, lots of the occasions in which the products and brands are consumed, they're actually not relevant at the moment. So maybe it could be that's why they've pulled back the spend. So yeah, it's interesting how companies are taking, nuanced kind of perspectives and tackling the crisis differently, which kind of makes sense.
Manoj, let's talk about the food industry. Do you expect the really increased focus on home cooking to continue, given your position at Rotomatic?
Yes, absolutely. Of course, we've seen across the world a very large number of people suddenly turning into the kitchen and starting to cook. If you look at the sheer number of people Googling for recipes and the Google search trends that show the increase in searches for things like recipes or how to cook rice or how to cook bread and things like that, it's of course gone really, really high in the last few weeks or so. So yes, people are cooking at home. And I had access to a survey that I looked at where out here in Asia, looking at different markets in Asia, a survey that asked consumers how much they would reprioritize eating at home post-COVID. And the data is in China, it is 86% saying that they would still continue to be reprioritizing eating at home. Hong Kong 77%, Malaysia 62%, Vietnam 62%, South Korea 62%. It's pretty big numbers of people saying that even post-crisis, it would continue to be the same. The only exception in the data that I had was Japan, where they actually said the other way around. I'm not quite sure why. Perhaps a little bit less of the severity, perhaps. But across other markets, a common theme that kept emerging was that of people state that they would continue to cook at home. The other interesting thing is of course the number of purchases that are happening in terms of appliances at home, for example, bread machines, electric rotisseries, and so on. So I had some data that I looked at from NPD that said in the US, the number of bread machines that have been purchased have gone up 8 times in March versus a year ago. Similarly, numbers for electric rotisseries and so on. So on the one hand, you have people who started cooking at home. They've started finding recipes to cook. Number two, they're getting in devices, appliances into their homes. And of course, the likely outcome for this logically should be that people will continue to some extent cooking at home. Perhaps a lot of people have suddenly discovered the benefits of cooking at home. They weren't doing that at all. And for sure, it has to be some of it that still will stay. It's hard to predict how much, but for sure, you would expect some of it will stay.
Do you think brands have a responsibility or an opportunity to continue nudging and supporting these new behaviours?
Absolutely. Brands do have the position that they can continue to nudge and help, or let's say, ease the pain or make it easier to get things done, to cook in the kitchen. So, I mean, the company that I worked for, Rotomatic, did exactly that, which is bringing technology in to ease the pain and just make it easier to cook at home. And for a lot of people, cooking at home does represent the healthiest way you can eat. And you can use technology to help that along and nudge it along. So absolutely, brands do have that ability, and that sense at this point in time, certainly the responsibility to nudge the right behaviors, so to say.
Frank, what's your perspective?
No, just a quick point. I think, home cooking is also, very much driven by, the ingredients you use, and trying to connect with your first question. I think the quality of the ingredient, the freshness, buying them locally is also something that consumers around the world are experiencing, more and more. And that is, I think, something that will stay part of this overall, wellness trend, trying to prioritize, fresh, ingredient, both locally versus, processed food.
Yes, I think that's an interesting point. I think what we have seen from our own data, I think Skaiste touched on it, was this this polarization piece where we see more and more local purchasing going on, partly as a result of lockdown, partly as a result of physically being unable to go to the big supermarkets or order particular food slots to have your groceries delivered, but also as a sort of moral obligation to keep local businesses and the local economy running for a lot of consumers. On a different point, Guto, can we talk about the leisure industry? It must be quite a tricky time at the moment. So do you expect hotel brands, when we do come out the other side of this and are able to come out the other side of this, that you'll be able to create new, more wellness-focused propositions? Is this something you were even already looking at?
Thank you. It's a tough time for the industry. We're at standstill. Airplanes are on the ground. Airports are empty. Hotels are empty. I think I agree with Frank. I think this crisis will help to amplify things the industry is already doing. I think the millennials got a bad rap, but they brought awareness to wellness to generations before that thought about it differently. So you will see the industry is already working on a lot of things. Hilton has 5 Feet to Fitness, a program where you have a little gym in your room. We do things for spas and restaurants with healthy eating. So I think that's already moving. I think the immediate thing you will see is on the prevention, is on the hygiene. Brands connecting with the Dettol's of the world to bring credibility to their establishments. So I think it's going to be the main thing. How do you bring a different level of safety, that side of wellness, to make sure people start moving again, until we go back at getting worried to, can I continue my well-being in terms of fitness and on the road? I think the first layer will be, am I safe when I go to these places? And it's not only hotels and airports, I think destinations as well. I grew up in Brazil and people ask me about malaria all the time. It's like, I never had a problem with malaria, but the perception that they have. I think innovations like what Panama has. Panama, when you go there, you get health insurance for 10 days when you're there. That is a really interesting innovation that I think you're going to start seeing. If you look at the crisis in the US, at least what we find out is it's higher numbers than in China, but China's brand has been hurt. So they might have to look at innovative ways to bring people to travel there. I think those are going to be the new things. I think the healthy and wellness side of it was a movement already. Ourselves and competitors are launching brands that are more focused on local sources of food, less impact on the environment with packaging and behavior and procedures, rooms and bigger gyms, or rooms that have their own gym, or even, I think there's a evolving definition of health and wellness. It used to be workout, and then recovery came in, and then sleep and mental health. That is evolving. Those things are things the industry knows very well. I saw numbers yesterday when I looked at in 2007, the wellness tourism industry passed $639 billion globally. So the industry is big itself on that side. But again, just not to repeat myself too much, I think the first thing you're going to see is that safety. Is it safe to go to a hotel, to a country, to a plane? So
let's talk about that safety piece, because I think there's some very specific, quite narrow use cases that I've obviously heard of in the last few days. I was talking to a friend of mine in the technology space who said, we'll never use a shared touchscreen again. So that means enormous implications for airlines with touchscreen check-in kiosks at airports across the world. It means enormous implications for hotels who've invested in creating staff-free touchscreen logins for getting your booking and your room key. Do you see some really significant investment in things like voice as a result of this as well, Guto?
Yeah, and it's interesting because lucky or not, we already see the industry going to using your own phone to open the doors and to activate elevators and check in. So right now you can actually get to a Hilton hotel, not talk to anybody, go through the lobby, get in the elevator, get in your room. So those things already help on that. I can't tell you how much it was because of hygiene or just comfort, but it's interesting. It's anecdote, but I remember watching the movie Out of Africa, and the wise man on the tribe says, when the gods want to punish you, they give you what you want. So it's interesting. How much do you want this pendulum to go to the other side? I keep imagining people saying, oh, I want hospital grade cleaning in my room. Have you smelled hospital grade cleaning? So is there an innovation where that level of cleanliness will bring a better feeling or not, or will the pendulum go too much and I'm not on the industry that Franck is that level of sterilization something that is safe. So I think we're going to have to look at where the consumer is. I absolutely think that there's a difference in what the consumer wants and what they need, and we're going to have to balance that very careful so the pendulum doesn't go too far away down, and it gets you're starting to use voice activated things that are awkward to use, and we're really going to have to test and iterate fast to understand where that middle point is.
Yeah, I think that last point about testing and iterating quickly is crucial here. I think we've seen that even in our own sort of last 6 weeks, we've seen the speed with which people have moved in lots of different sectors to create entirely new propositions, services, and other bits and pieces to fit with the current need state. So I think it's really interesting to kind of have that point made. Lucy, let's come to you. Let's talk about fitness brands. Let's talk about the fitness industry. Do you expect individual sports like cycling and running to dominate the next 2 years? Are we going to see people absolutely fascinated by track and field at the Olympics at the expense of football? And what do brands like Reebok do to tap into this sort of competing together but apart behavior that we're seeing with, the Strava app being, I think, in the top 10 downloaded apps for the last 5 or 6 weeks, and that's ahead of things like WhatsApp and Instagram that have been staples of the App Store top 10 for ages. What's your perspective on that?
So it's a really interesting time for fitness at the moment, and one of the biggest learnings so far from the UK, certainly in fitness terms through this, is that exercise for a lot of people used to be a chore, sometimes a bit of a punishment. It was a 6 a.m. or 6 p.m. You have to go to the gym and get this done. And it's been badged by the government, by our nation, as an essential part of everyday life. And it's now kind of transformed into this real high point of people's days. I know a lot of people who they used to train at lunchtime or after work, and they're now actually getting up and they're starting their day with an Instagram live class. They're texting friends beforehand saying, hey, I'm going to do this class, come and join me. And they're getting a real sense of connection from it. Obviously, there are loads of people out cycling and running. I used to go to the gym sort of 50% of my sessions and go out running 50% of my sessions. I'm now just out in the Peak District running up hills and kind of wondering why I went out every day. And there are an awful lot of people going out and doing those things. And I think that will continue. Typically, it takes about 30 days to sort of form a habit. And certainly in the UK, the lockdown has now been extended, so it's 6 weeks. So there is sufficient time there for people to form habits. And I think fitness is such an underrated helper in dealing with mental health issues. And there's so much anxiety for so many people coming out of this pandemic that exercise is only going to be a positive way of dealing with things. It doesn't solve everything on its own, but it's certainly a part. So I think a lot of people who've kind of been forced to get out on their bike or running just as an escape and as a bit of a way of finding headspace and some quiet from the kids running around perhaps, they're going to realise the benefits that they get from that and perhaps being more productive, feeling more positive, and they are going to continue. In terms of how brands can sort of support that, I think it's really an opportunity to really listen to consumers and what they're responding to. It can be a danger of, you sit in your office and you do your marketing and you talk about your audience as this big consumer group, and they're not, they're individuals, and they're all having a different experience in this time, whether they've been furloughed, how they've been affected impacts their experience. So it's a real opportunity for brands to listen to what consumers are responding to. For example, something like Peloton, which has been seen as a really premium brand, actually they're seeing quite an uptake, not just in the bikes being delivered to people's homes, but you can just download the app for $12.99 a month, I think it is. So you can't get a spin bike for love nor money on the internet at the moment. So people are kind of looking for ways to access a premium service at a more affordable rate, But the biggest learnings is that people are understanding the value of fitness, and that if you want access to it, you don't have to spend a fortune on it. It can be free.
So let's talk actually about that, that sort of barriers to entry challenge. I think it's probably fair to say that wellness brands have been seen as a more premium proposition for the majority of their period of existence. And that actually wellness has not been at the very top of the agenda for people who have less disposable income to throw around. Do we think that that's going to change, given your kind of suggestion about Peloton and other bits being taken up, and the massive download of Strava, which is of course free in its basic form? And I think broadly to the rest of the panel, once you've answered that, Lucy, what's the sort of responsibility of brands around the world to work hard right now, particularly right now, to lower those barriers to entry, to make it easier for more people to get involved with wellness across the world?
So I guess we've got a couple of different phases, right? So at the moment, a lot of people having to choose function over luxury, or for example, someone might choose a low price cleaning product that they know isn't perhaps the best for the environment because they can't afford the more expensive, environmentally friendly, plastic free, etc. cleaning products. So in fitness terms, they might not be able to afford a Peloton bike, but they can get out and go for a run for free and use Strava. But wellness brands are often positioned as aspirational brands as well. And people obviously get older, the amount of money that they have to spend changes. But ultimately, this is an opportunity for brands to really understand their sort of, audience group and how they're experiencing this time, and build a long-term relationship with them. I think those are the brands that are going to be remembered, because it might not be that you have an individual, a consumer spending money with you right now, but that doesn't mean to say that they're not going to look at what you're doing as a brand and think they understand what's going on at the moment. They understand what I'm going through. And when I have, when my disposable income increases, when I have the opportunity, that's a brand that I want to, I want to put my money into. I think particularly with Gen Z, yes, this is a pandemic and it's completely different to anything we've been through before. Gen Z have grown up in a huge time of uncertainty. They're kind of born in the age of 9/11, and a lot of uncertainty, a lot of anxiety, and a lot of change. And there is a big cancel culture, and they do look at brands who are behaving in particular ways and respond accordingly.
Frank, let's come to you. What's your perspective on this?
Just to build on Lucy's point, I think there's still a lot of question about this virus, COVID-19. But one thing that I think there is a consensus is that the vulnerable population and comorbidities, and it's clear that people with that are overweight, suffer from obesity, people who suffer from diabetes are unfortunately more victim of the virus. And I think this will be a wake-up call. And again, it refers back to exercising, being fit, living longer, healthier, eating the right food, maybe cooking at home. So I think everything squares, and that, yes, this trend was very much driven by the younger generation, but now that people realize that it's the older people that are impacted the most, and it's because of their lifestyle, sedentarity, the fact that they don't necessarily eat the right food. I think a lot of people will realize and will take new resolution, whether they'll be fully successful, whether those new habits will last over time. The jury is still out, but I think we'll see again an acceleration of an existing trend.
Skaiste, you have a perspective.
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to your very original question on whether the premium brands have a responsibility to actually have help the wider society to be healthy. And I think, obviously, definitely yes, but almost the premium brands should find, ways for, more people to access their services, not only because obviously they will reap financial benefits, but it's because it will be good for their brand, because that, you can see consumers, what they really value now is like helping older people, helping the community. So, in that kind of theme, if you are seen to be helping the wider society to access wellness solutions, that will definitely benefit your brand.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. We've seen this sort of actions speak louder than words perspective shared hugely online. And I think some of the biggest stories have been about brands making multi-million, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars worth of commitments to society, to health services, to key workers, to all sorts, as a way of getting away from just the platitudes of some of the advertising that we're seeing, I guess. That actions piece is really interesting to me. I mean, do you think brands taking action now should also look to partnerships? I think some of the things that I've definitely seen is this ability for brands in a crisis to come together, to work together, to benefit more people more broadly. Do you think that sort of partnership piece is going to be one of the things that could drive these barriers to entry down and could make wellness a more shared responsibility of brands and businesses around the world?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, you can, the brands will come to, stronger, better solutions by cooperating. And, going back to my original point, there will definitely, the brand image will be stronger for it, because that's what consumers are expecting. They're expecting the big giants to work for, greater good and collaborate for the greater good.
Manoj, do you see this happening in Asia as well?
Yes. I was thinking of an example, not specifically wellness, but for example, here Singapore Airlines has deployed a lot of its staff to nursing services. Now that's a fantastic way of taking staff that you have who are not really doing anything, because obviously planes are on the ground, and putting them to areas where they can actually serve the community and help. Perhaps not specialized areas, but certainly in ways they can help. That's a great way of getting your brand to actually get involved and really contribute.
Yes. Do you have a perspective on this as well, Guto?
I think the partnership with brands does a couple of things that you can join forces, but you also can bring different specialties into it. So again, going a Lysol or a Dettol with a hospitality brand can bring the credibility of one industry to the other one. Also, Hilton just donated 1 million nights to health workers in the US. So it's getting something that we have right now, just like Manoj was saying, getting something we have right now, helped with the funding of American Express, that is already a partner that we have in terms of the credit cards, and servicing a community that needs some help right now. They go home and they could take the disease home as well. They don't have where to stay. So getting two brands together, one with the fundings, one with the area that we already have, the rooms are empty right now, and bringing it together, I think is really good. But also in that credibility, right? We've been talking about right now, how can we help people at home? And we looked at, for example, we have amazing chefs. So can we bring the brand of those chefs with Hilton and bring it back home to people and help them? But I think bringing that specialty, be it from a Dettol, being it from Thrive, Ariana Huffington's brand of wellness, and how can we pair together? Because you can't be a specialist in multiple areas, right? But when we look at the 5 feet to fitness in our room, who can we partner that knows yoga very well, that knows mindfulness very well? I think it can bring down the cost and bring up the value of the experience for guests and consumers in general.
And Lucy, is this the same for sports brands, do you think, as well?
Yeah, I think so. I think any kind of pandemic, anyone who's been through a big period of change in their lives knows how uncomfortable it is. You're kind of forced to really look at yourself and figure out what your values are, what your moral compass is, where you stand on particular topics. And I don't think that's any different for brands than it is for individuals. So I think it's a real opportunity for brands to decide what they stand for, and then to make sure that that is translated into action. And we're very much social creatures. We're driven by connection. We're driven by storytelling. And at the moment, everyone wants to feel like they're not on their own. One of the things that makes this kind of bearable is just someone who's sitting at home through this is that actually everyone's going through the same thing. Regardless of what stage they're at, there is that connectivity there. So I think from a brand point of view, it's seeking out people who have similar sets of values to you, but can bring something slightly different, whether that's a different perspective, a different audience, a different skill that you perhaps don't have in-house, and kind of creating some real good out of it. Content has been king for a long time. There's a lot of content out there, but really we have a responsibility, I think, to our consumers to put out good quality content and really make the most of the skills. Got a lot of people who really want to do, they're really ambitious and really want to do more and go over and above. So it's a great opportunity to work with your communities to make that happen.
So I think I'm going to talk now a little bit about sort of the general kind of business context of the crisis for each of your businesses, and the extent to which we're ready to move, and I think this will vary sector by sector, brand by brand, but the extent to which we're ready to move from that reactive position of supporting and helping out the wider community to getting onto the front foot and being more proactive and thinking about beyond the crisis. Can you talk a little bit to that, Franck? I mean, it must be quite challenging to be in a position where the industry is, in some respects, doing relatively well, in some respects, from the crisis in terms of people's desire for the products that are being produced by your brand, but at the same time working out when the right time is to start talking about either new propositions, new products and services that might help people as we come out of the crisis.
Yeah, because we believe, again, back to this, acceleration, catalyst image. We believe the crisis will drive the development of new competitors for us. We had a set of historical big competitors, smaller companies, but for example another trend that will accelerate is digitalization. Skaiste as mentioned, telemedicine as one illustration of this trend, but we believe digital health solution will also accelerate, and suddenly most likely we're going to compete against the Apple, Amazon, Alphabet, Google of this world. So I think that we're going to see shift in the industry in terms of an abundance of new solution, and we talked about natural with prevention probably gaining in importance, but also digital health solution will most likely develop, and with it we will see new competitors we will have to fight against.
I see some nodding there, Manoj. What's your perspective?
Yeah, I was just reminded when Franck talked about new competitors. It's very interesting. If you take the platform that we're on, Zoom, I mean, who would have thought that from video conferencing we would go to online dating and all sorts of things, learning from home and all sorts of activities happening on Zoom. On Zoom, there's even a setting, I believe, I haven't tried it, but it's a setting that actually can make you look better on a Zoom call. So reduce the blemishes on the skin. So can you imagine this is now competing with skincare? Yeah. So to Franck's point, yeah, absolutely. You don't know where your next competitor is going to come from.
Hugh, 2/3 of our audience frantically looking for that setting right now. So let's talk about the practical steps that businesses can take. I mean, if we're in, it feels from everything the panel said that we're sort of on the cusp of getting ready to think about what's next. What are the jobs that you think your business should be doing or is doing right now? I'll come to you first, Guto. In terms of planning, are you going out and looking for new insights? Are you ready to do that yet? Are you doing reviewing of innovation strategy? What's the current kind of feel inside the business?
I think businesses nowadays, if you don't already monitor on a day-to-day basis your consumer, you better start. But Hilton is very keen to the consumer. Obviously, right now, better than ever, we are trying to predict, and it's a crystal ball thing, what will happen after. We can look at previous crises, we can look at previous downturns. We are privileged of starting to see that, as you guys mentioned before, established brands will do well. Hilton celebrated 100 years last year. So if you look into the numbers, we started during the Spanish flu. We've seen a couple of world wars. We've seen other pandemics. And I think we're looking at our own history and seeing how we to go through this. But it is unprecedented, like the Second World War and things like that. We are trying to make sure to understand. It is nowadays, we are privileged to see, nobody schedules an expensive trip tomorrow. So we're starting to see searches. I just saw on CN Traveler that searches for vacation in Spain are up 2,000% for January next year. So some people are predicting even the demand will be bigger than the supply. We hope so. But I think we are continuing to look at trends and monitoring what we are seeing in chatter, online, and behaviors of search and things like that that will look at us. But again, I think immediately will be, how can we get people mobile again? How can we, at least as being a brand that relies in physical places, if we don't adapt as fast onto those environments as we do with services. So how can we keep it to the standard of cleanliness and safety that people expect? How can we make it easier for them to use their points back and forth? So our innovation, our ability to shift things is much more on that service. How can we get people to go back and trust us really fast? Then changing our products where we need to build a new hotel, we'll change that stuff. So it's more on procedures. It's more on flexibility, how we change our food services to make that faster. And I think there will be value as well. You know, usually in crises like this, you have that split. You either want the minimum, I don't want to get out of my room, I don't need to spend for this, I've been for a year without having my full salary, how can I get that out? Or there's the luxury one. How can I get a villa where I don't see other people and I have everything catered to me? So we're starting to see that service and obviously monitoring, like we have to monitor and listen to the consumer and translate that into a real need. Yeah. But again, I can't emphasize, like the beginning is how can we get people confident that getting out there is safe and sound.
Perfect. Skaiste, do you have a perspective on what brands should be doing right now?
Yeah, so it's definitely very important to monitor the trends and listen to the consumers now and understand what kind of frictions are actually really big in their life and what do they really want us to solve. So that's more kind of listening and reacting to consumers. But another point I wanted to make is that actually brands will have an opportunity to lead and introduce new solutions that consumers haven't thought about and aren't asking for. And it isn't, we have gone through a life-changing event. The consumers will be open to new solutions. So I think the future will be not only about the brands adapting to new needs and adapting the services, but actually it will be about certain brands you will see will lead with completely new transformative innovations that offer something to consumers they've not thought of before.
So Lucy, is the game identifying habits that have been made more prevalent or made stronger by the crisis, and also looking to sort of almost predict the types of habit that will last beyond the release of lockdown, which we know will be coming, we hope, in the coming weeks?
So Frank made a really interesting point at the beginning, and I was nodding furiously about sort of existing trends just becoming more mainstream. So I liken it to, that feeling when you're on a Zoom call and someone's audio is really crackly, you can't quite hear them, but you're like, oh, maybe it's just me and everyone else can hear fine. You're just kind of waiting for someone else more senior than you to say, excuse me, I can't hear you very well, you need to sort your audio out. I kind of feel like a lot of consumers, particularly around mental health and around well-being and fitness, that's their reaction to brands, and they're waiting for the brands to kind of validate the way that they're feeling, the fact they're feeling anxious or isolated, or that they're struggling with that wellness aspect. So I think the trend is absolutely there, and it's not going to go anywhere. I think consumers are going to feel like they have more choice in how they go about engaging with fitness. One trend that I'm definitely seeing is move towards supporting local gyms and local communities. So this is happening across Europe, and particularly in CrossFit boxes and local gyms. They cleaned and rented out their equipment at the start of this. So in return for people continuing to pay their membership fees, they get some equipment to keep using at home, and then they're doing live Zoom classes and things just to kind of keep members going. So I think that's a really interesting trend, and it's going to kind of cement individuals' positive association with a local community and a local fitness service. So I think that's going to be, I think that that trend is going to continue. And onto the people who are traveling, they're just going to really prioritize their wellness a bit more highly than they have been doing so far. And they're going to be looking to brands who can support them wherever they are. So for example, in my normal line of work, I'm never in one place for more than about 3 or 4 days. So this is a huge change for me. But when I'm back out on the road, I will be looking for brands who can support my mental well-being and my fitness, regardless of where I am, rather than having to kind of chop and change based on location.
Thank you. I think this has been fascinating. I'm keeping an eye on time. I think we could probably talk for another 2.5 hours, because I've definitely got questions for it. But rather than keep everyone for longer than that, I'm just going to wrap up with a bit of a summary. But firstly, thank you so much to the 5 of you. It's been a fantastic and really fascinating discussion and a great conversation. We're delighted to have been able to set this up. I think just looking at the conversation we've had, I think it's very clear that from all of the conversations that I've also been having externally to this, marketers, strategists, experienced professionals, innovators are all looking to work out not just what to do next, but when to do it. And it feels very much like we're in a position where we've started to see, and your point, Lucy, about habit forming over 30 days is a fascinating one. We've started to see these new habits form. And as lockdown has been extended around the world, some of those habits will naturally just persist. And there is evidence for that from previous pandemics, as Skaiste touched on earlier, from the H1N1 crisis in Mexico through to what happened in Hong Kong with SARS. We know that certain behaviors persist. And what's interesting to me is the unintended consequences of those behaviors persisting. I read a lovely piece that identified that in the Mexico case, not only did infections on influenza and other viral diseases drop, but actually deaths from diarrhea in the under 5s dropped by over 70% in the 5 years following that crisis, because it changed behavior for the good. And I'm reminded of some of the big behavior change campaigns that we've seen from brands around the world. The Lifebuoy Global Hand Washing Day is one that really comes to mind from a big Unilever brand. And I can just see now coming forward, brands taking responsibility for helping to create positive behavior change around the world. And those big brands, when they can partner together, to Guto's point about Hilton partnering potentially with a Dettol or equivalent to reassure people about room hygiene, you can see some of these brands coming together where there is a joint benefit and creating even greater impact on consumer behavior for the long term. I think it's a fascinating time. I think it's a very difficult time for many of us, for many of the brand marketers that I know are on the call and have joined the webinar. But hopefully the audience has learnt some really useful stuff. So I'm just going to wrap it up there and say thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you so much to the 120 odd attendees who've all come along. I will share a copy of the recording of this together with some of the question answers later this week. And please do check back to clearstrategy.com and follow us on LinkedIn for future conversations. Our next conversation will be around the 6th or 7th of May. We're just finalizing the date. And that will be on the topic of trust and purpose, a more detailed description to come in the next few days. Another big conversation topic that we think many, many brands around the world are really struggling with right now around communications, around the experiences they provide and other elements of their portfolio. So thank you again to all of our wonderful panelists. Thank you for the audience. And please take part in the next conversation. Thanks and goodbye.